So Viktor and Rolf, you've always been a little bit outside the fashion system and critical of it. Now you look rather visionary for that. What does it mean not to be involved in that world?
Well, I think it's part of our essence to want to work inside of the system and outside of the system, because it's just really part of who we are to always want to take a step back and analyze and reflect on ourselves, on what we do, what our work means, and also on what fashion means. That's really how we started out, by reflecting on fashion.
So, commenting on the fashion world, we can do it in several ways. Sometimes we do it in a more poetic way, like the blue screen show we did, or in a more aggressive way, like we did with the No Show. But it's always about raising questions and not so much about answering big questions, or more about, I think, raising awareness and telling stories.
And I think it's also a very personal approach, because both collections that Rolf mentioned, the Blue Screen Show and the No Show, really stem from personal longings or personal frustrations. With the Blue Screen Show, we try to express a desire that I think is fundamental to our work, which is to always go beyond the product, to look for a meaning beyond fashion or beyond a seasonal trend. And the same goes for the No Show, which was very much about a personal frustration about how we work in the fashion system, and also about how the fashion industry requires us, all of us designers, to work with the ever increasing speed, which makes it hard to tap into one's own creativity.
Let's talk for a moment about globalism. Because you aren't able to come to this postponed conference in New Delhi, we're talking here in London. You've come from Holland, where you're based, and your clothes are sold around the world. You show in Paris. How do you feel about the global universe, whether it's fashion or whether it is in general? Are you happy that everything is now so interconnected?
We are, and ever since we started out, we've made it a point to not consider ourselves the Dutch designers. Of course, we are Dutch, but we've always felt attracted to fashion because it is an international phenomenon. That's exactly why we love it, and it's an international language, and that's also why we think that fashion could be a medium that could transmit other messages than seasonal trends, also messages about sustainability. I mean, it's perfectly suited because it speaks to everybody.
I know you're always questioning yourselves, but I've got a question for you. Do you think that India could teach the Western world a lot about the idea of sustainability, about staying with something without changing fashion constantly?
Well, we do think there's, let's say, an unrealistic approach in the West to newness and trends. And this is stiffening, we think, the fashion system. And that's why we feel diversity is so important in the world and in the fashion system. It's not about the trend of the season, it's about the story that designers tell themselves. Everybody has his own story to tell. And that's why we think it's very, very important that India has its own voice. And a garment like the sari is very...
It's a beautiful example of a sustainable style, and I think probably saris are also subject to trends, very subtle trends probably, but it's beautiful because it's so authentic and it's so much a part of a country. And we would hate for a country like India, that with its emerging economy, to all of a sudden switch to jeans, t-shirts, and high heels. God forbid.
But we're already seeing, whether it's in the clubs in Mumbai or around in India, that there has been a lot of change towards Western clothes. And in a way, I mean, who are we to say, no, you can't put on a t-shirt and jeans?
Exactly, it will have to come from India to they will be defining their own style, and it's not an either or situation, because if you look at another country like the Middle East, for instance, they have very strict dress codes, but the yearning for fashion and for haute couture and jewelry and accessories is incredible, but it coexists.
It's interesting to think of the idea that a designer's eye, or in this case two designers' eyes, could look at something in India and imagine how it could be developed, whether it's a question of colours or materials or indeed just the whole silhouette?
I think mainly what's inspiring about a country like India and a culture like India is the authenticity of it, and it's really its originality and its own roots. And we would hate for a style like that to change and become completely westernized, so to speak.
I want to talk to you now about the subject of sustainability and the subject of green. It's very difficult to define exactly what green means, but we know what it means, I think, in our hearts. It's just that feeling of not being wasteful, of trying to look for things to be made in a way that doesn't harm or hurt anybody personally, or, of course, the environment. Is this something that comes into your quite intellectual approach?
It's a very difficult and complex subject. I've just read Friedman's new book, and what is needed to save the planet is so much more than we could ever imagine now, that we are afraid that the word green in fashion tends to become a bit like a...
Well, it runs the risk of becoming a trend, and trends pass. So that would be terrible, because the issue at hand is so complex. And if you would zoom in on biodegradable materials or green materials, as admirable as it is, you run the risk of zooming in on a detail of a really complex issue that, as an industry, and I mean just as humankind, we need to address.
And for us, being sustainable and being green is a collective
A group effort.
A group effort. And as well, I think when we talk about fashion, we think the fashion system could as well heal itself by seeing itself more sustainable and by being less focused on trends and rejecting almost creativity, but seeing things with a long-term vision.
So, do you think that Indian designers could maybe do something in the world as an entity?
Well, we are very curious to see what Indian designers can bring to the global platform and in the international language that fashion is, like the Japanese wave in the 80s, who had so much their own voice. We are very curious to see the Indian voice.
Viktor and Rolf, believing in India and its designers, believing in luxury and sustainability, believing in the future of fashion. Thank you so much for talking to me on this video for the International Herald Tribune Conference.
It was very nice talking to you, and we hope that through this interview we will be able to inspire people, because ultimately that's our goal, to inspire through our work, through fashion.